Hello, my name is Rhian Edwards, and I will be reading from my new collection of poems, The Estate Agent's Daughter, which came out with Seren in June. I've been very fortunate in the fact it's been shortlisted. It's a recommended poetry book for National Poetry Day, which is happening on the 2nd of October. And without further ado, I will do the title poem, which is The Estate Agent's Daughter. The estate agent's daughter is sold as seen, semi-detached. In walking distance of Pen, Abontarogor, all its mod cons, located in a quiet hammerhead. She has double wrought iron gates, hard standing parking for two. Her pea gravel driveway sweeps to a cloudy apple composite door, stained window with leaded detail. Her hallway is carpeted with sycamore seeds and cherry blossom throughout. White dogleg staircase with spindle gallery landing, which leads to a loft conversation with a skylight widow. Her ground floor comprises open plan lunge diner, recesses either side of her fire breast wall. Her oak writing desk has been nudged to the brink of the bay. Curtains may be drawn around her to quarantine at will. The dining table moonlights as auxiliary desk. Cable knit cardigans draped across the shoulders of IKEA chairs come as standard. Spider warding conkers mob her laminated corners in vain. She boasts a galley kitchen with splashback tiling, sunken spotlighting, integrated frigidity freezer, eye-level oven rarely used, white goods to remain. The master bedroom is in dire need of updating. Juliet balcony in state of disrepair. Outside she has a storm porch with power and lighting, chipped area to the side. The estate agent's daughter retains many original features, coved ceilings, double gazing throughout. Unsuitable for first-time buyers. No ongoing chain. This next poem is a game I played with my father when I was a child, and actually the awful thing is I'm actually making my daughter play it as well. I suppose it's one of the USPs of being the estate agent's daughter. This is called Counting Boards, and it goes like this. Instead of I spy in your cortina, we counted your for sale boards, the petrified wooden flags of you, the Austrian red-white stripes of you, earmarking the houses for market, as if the town was your game of Monopoly. The black capitals of your name fill the lines to the brim, your middle initial crowbarred in, to distinguish you from the famouser you. You taught me ratios by 5-bar gating, the boards of your competitors. Peyton Julian Keynes, Peter Allen, Peter Morgan, Porters, Adam Hurst, Reed Evans, Bobby Powell of Powell and Jones, the Sergeant Major who apprenticed you all. I learned street names by solicitors, Whittingham's, David and Snape, David Prosser's, Uncle Ronnie of R.L. Edwards, who loathed his lawful life, the very practice I was being groomed for. After the abacus of board game, we drove to your take-ons in silence, where I dragged the ribbon of the tape measure to the corners of each room where you doubted my precision, and you confided more words to your dictaphone than I could receive in a single tax year. This next poem, I haven't learned off by heart actually. I've never read it out before. It's called Free No Obligation Valuation. Mr. Edwards calls her Judith Chalmers on account of the fact she's always on bloody holiday. She's a teddy bear smile at your front door, a valuation pack and business card on your coffee table. She knows the life story behind every house on her shelves. She'll make you a cup of tea in your own kitchen if you need her to. She'll always find the right cupboard. It's just bricks and mortar, she'll assure you, as you weep at your four walls. The photos of weddings, births and holidays that weren't enough to keep the home cemented. She will describe your home as attractive and immaculate on the dictaphone as you dodge the sniper light of the laser measure darting across your rooms. She tears her hair out at the computer as she gets her comparables together. You'll always get a personal thank you letter the following day, first class post. She can't get through a lager and lime at the Spoons without an old school friend asking for a vowel. Sometimes, Rhea, gotta go with my gut. You ever try cooking chicken with Coke? Now make Clospush Cly property of the week, will you? Tell Craig I'll call him back. Is the mortgage offer out? Have they commissioned searches on Hazeldine Avenue? And don't talk to me about Japanese knotweed. This next poem is called Argos Wedding, and it goes like this. The wedding queue at Worth Street City Hall, Manhattan, is akin to the wait at Alton Towers. We are given a butcher's ticket. The usherette has a handgun. We keep watching the screen for our number to come up. I tell my sister-in-law in waiting, this is just like Argos. Who knew you could buy a wedding bouquet from a vending machine? Our witnesses, your Bronx ice hockey team, your Minnesotan sister. I am the only thing here that belongs to me. Part 2. I clap shut my compact, shatter the mirror inside. I laugh at the 7-year hex I've divined minutes before our half-hearted vows. The armed usherette orders the witnesses to get out of line. Most of the marrying are wearing sweatpants. Still they glare at me, cradling my splintered mirror, as if I've cursed this conveyor belt of non-committal brides. This next poem was also in my illustrated pamphlet called Brood that came out in 2017, which is based on the mnemonic magpie rhyme, 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy. The poem I'm going to do now is 4 for a boy. And it goes like this. As foreign as a man could be, skin pale as a magpie's shoulder, black feathered hair, a skull cap of curls arranged in a chicanery of tenderness. He had a hooked Roman nose, aquiline, the Latin for eagle-like, the certitude of a curved beak that darted straight for the stage. He sang country with a spurious Texan twang, alien birdsong. He plucked his own strings harshly, souring the music, discording the smallness of his voice. I had him pegged as a midnight cowboy, freshly dismounted from the greyhound, what with his plaid shirt, weathered jeans, a belt buckle that made him a man of two halves. He lived sparse as a monk in that Manhattan apartment. He shampooed his hair with a bar of soap, boiled his coffee in a saucepan, capsized wooden coke crate on a desk, a defeated dog on the couch. I found his coarseness winsome. Yet the metronomic pecking, the incidental score of us, came from a savage remoteness, a coldness that scaffolded a birdcage inside the hollow of the hooded nest. Seven years ago, my body started betraying me, is the way I see it. I think that's how a lot of people consider chronic pain. And I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. So first it was my feet weren't working, and then it was my hands that went. His poem is called The 3 Words You Hate Being Asked Describe the Pain. The doctor staples her thumb and index into my extremities, wrists, phalanges, soles and toes. Is this my cue to wince, flinch with histrionics, kick like a bygone frog brimming with electric charge? I am failing you as the patient and as the incidental poet, as I ransack the gurney for the pitch-perfect adjective, just as I rifle for a poem that deserves to be borstaled. Your sliding scale of 1 to 10 is nothing but an abacus of stamina, the fortitude to shrug away or feebly endure. Are dull stabbing and throbbing the only pains on the menu? What if the ache has taken root? a sly guest with squatter's rights, a livid twin absorbed. This is part 2, the abacus of stamina. There is the me who diarises her day by rationing the stair climbs, who strews pillows like mock stepping stones to the sirening of the cot. There is the me who hangs her hands under the scalding water tap to recapture the fingers that are frozen perpendicular in the night. There is the me whose wrist vein bulges, whose knuckles have swollen vague, who cannot hoist a mug to her lips and uses the pushchair as a Zimmer frame. Where is the me who was a sprinter, a district tennis champion, who could scale the mile-end wall and slink up the rope in gym like a coconut cutter? There is the me who flounders with buttons, who cannot shell a tampon of its plastic, is unable to dangle her daughter by the ankles, and barely leaves an impression with her pen. This next poem is the third part in the quartet of rheumatoid arthritis poems, the chronic pain poems. It was inspired by a commission by Swansea University for the Vernon Watkins centenary, and there was a line by Vernon Watkins that gave me this title, and then the whole poem just followed. It's called The Art of Fastening, and it goes like this. These fingers are chopsticks, decrypting the riddle of buttoning your school blouse. My fumbles fall down the ladder of your shirt, trying to remaster the trick of twisting, flipping four-eyed moons through a hole. My 3-year-old tenders a helping hand, a starfish ham-fisted yanking at discs and thread. This only kindles the dread of these gutless fingers making stabs at sewing the buttons back on. Who knew the coiling of baubles around plaits could capsize me? The cat cradling between index and thumb could collapse under an elastic band's tension, now that hair must be tied to ward off lice. Before, your wardrobe was painless, your hair given free rein. It now takes a dexterity, a smiling sticker you have yet to earn, while my art of fastening fritters away. Okay, and now going into the third part of The Estate Agent's Daughter, which is the love stuff. This poem is called He is the Kind, and it goes like this. He is the kind of man who clicks his fingers at the radio, discards his tea bags on my draining board, despite my navigations to the compost bin. He is the kind of man who has nothing in the morning except an unruly cardigan, quotes Winnicott while stirring honey into his porridge. He is the kind of man who makes a beeline for my bookcase, wears his silent reading like an invisibility cloak. He is the kind of man who is languid in his crumbling Audi, sheds his seatbelt like my bra strap when compelled to reverse. He is the kind of man who calls me baby, divining my mother's caveat that only the unfaithful bless you with a pet name. He is the kind of man who brings 2 mugs of tea to bed in the morning, both of which are for himself. He is the kind of man who eats only half a banana, bandaging the needless remainder in the blackening of its skin. This next poem is called My Clocks Pester Him, and it goes like this. He gagged the alarm clock, buried her alive in the knicker drawer. He unhung the faux French wall clock and smothered her ticks in the dirty laundry. He made himself at home by dislodging their batteries, pausing their panicked hands mid-air, leaving them dumb, heartless. What became of the novelty bird clock with 12 species of tweet? How did she meet her untimely demise to never again chirp on the hour? And did he have to dig out the tongue of the innocuous carriage clock, the letter opener lying by her side like a murder weapon. She never sung another note. How I miss my metronomic circus, the unsynchronized pulse of my rooms, my ornamental pets morse coding one another across the gulf of the hallway. In this loveless silence, this paralysis of time, I tap my impatient soul, talk my bitten tongue, percussing the hourglass of our untouching hands. This is now my last poem, and it's called The Addiction Counsellor. The addiction counsellor has a tranquilizing voice. He wears his glasses on his scalp, the crown of an understated prince. The addiction counsellor's irises are tucked far behind his crow's feet. I edge closer than fiduciary allows to discern the colours I am dealing with. I confess to the addiction counsellor I'm not really addicted to anything. He informs me to the contrary, tells me I'm hungry to be touched. The addiction counsellor has feathers instead of fingers. He holds my hip bones lightly as he passes me in the doorway. I have stopped listening to the addiction counsellor, my attention rapt with his futon in the room next door. The addiction counsellor gifts me a bottle of Moët for buying my very first house. The addiction counsellor asks me if his gesture is too much. I tell my daughter on the way to nursery, the addiction counsellor puts butterflies in Mummy's tummy. She rightly reprimands me for wolfing butterflies again. Thank you. Right then, I understand I have some questions to answer. Right, what is my writing process? Right, eclectic, chaotic, certainly not as regular as it should be, or that it used to be. When I was first trying to establish myself, I think having children was my game changer in terms of the luxury of time, and time is a luxury, and when you have it, by all means use it, and by all means write within it. Who was it? Ian Hamilton said, "A day without writing poetry is a day wasted." Yeah, and I wholeheartedly believe that. It is vital, for me anyway, and for all writers. I think writing is vital. Prior to having children, I probably did write every day, especially when I lived in London, because I had so much time commuting. I think my lunch hour in cafes, that used to be my writing time as well. I tend to write in the evening. And I found when I first moved to Bridgend, I was very strict about submitting my work to different magazines. I would generally submit to 3 magazines per Friday. And that was before they even accepted online submissions. So I also had a massive spreadsheet with all the poems down in the column down, all the lists of poetry magazines in the horizontal, and for each one I submitted, I would tick the corresponding magazine. Once it was accepted, I would put it in red and then black out all the other magazines so I wouldn't submit it again, because most poetry magazines want unpublished work. And that was probably on my most fecund year of getting published. I had a poetry mentor who said always have something in the post, and I did adhere to that during that time. Now my writing process used to be when my daughter's father had her for his alternate weekends. So I'd catch up on my poetry then, but he's now moved abroad. So for the past year, I haven't really written much, if I'm perfectly honest, which breaks my heart. But this is also because I have a full-time job as well and maintain my own house, and I have my little girl. So I do struggle to find the time. And also, sounds like I'm making excuses now, but also with the rheumatoid arthritis, I get tireder a lot quicker. So usually by 9 o'clock I'm done for. Whereas in my younger days, I would have definitely stayed up till midnight writing. and those days have gone, unfortunately. How do you edit your work? Right, so I do several drafts. I find a lot of people handwrite their drafts. I find I have to type them. The words are clearer to me. I have shocking handwriting, so instead of trying to decrypt that riddle, it's easier for me to see it in print. The easiest thing I find is don't save each draft. Keep it all contained in one Word document. So every time I revisit a poem, a draft of a poem, I copy and paste it, put it above, change the date, and then I can rework it. And then I just have to scroll down below to revisit the old draft to see if I've unnecessarily culled something. And I edit my work until I can take it no further, because sometimes you can end up butchering your work by over editing it, and you can edit all the joy out of it because you get bored of it. So I take a poem as far as I'm willing to take it, and then I workshop it. I have a close writers group called Answers on a Postcard, and I'm surrounded by people who provide very constructive feedback. And yeah, and then I will then remold the poem according to the different, so I'll probably have about 6 drafts that they've all doctored, and I see how I can encapsulate that into the kind of the final drafts. And again, I think a poem, do they say a poem is never finished, it's abandoned? It's all about taking it as far as you can take it. I also find, as you've probably noticed, I do learn most of my poems off by heart. So when I get a chance to walk on my own, I'm normally mumbling a poem, so that's a huge part of the creative process, is working it while I'm walking. I think Wordsworth used to do it that way. I'm in no way a comparison. And you find by orating the words of what you're writing is a really good part of the editing process as well. Because you can see what scans, you can see where you stumble, and if you keep stumbling over the same patch, you know you need to keep on reworking it until it's fluid. That's why a lot of my poetry has a very distinctive bounce and musicality about it. I think because of that that walking traipsic sort of almost iambic pentameter heartbeat process in which I do tend to edit my work. What is the third question here? Keeps dying on me. What book or authors help to inspire or influence your work? So I have to confess, and I know it's very cliched for a Welsh poet, but I probably was hugely influenced by Dylan Thomas. In my house, we very frequently had Under Milkwood playing, and he was the acceptable face of poetry in my house. So Under Milkwood was a real big influence, if I'm candid. Another one was Dorothy Parker. I loved her wit. I loved the kind of the acerbic, the vitriolic kind of poetry she wrote. So initially I was very much a rhymer, which I later lost. She wrote about love gone wrong, and I think love gone wrong has been a common thread in all my poetry, as much as I was hoping the second book would be more about nature poetry and not about love gone wrong. Invariably, it always finds its way in. Sadly, I hate the fact that does inspire me, but I think I'm going to become a nun after this. Hugo Williams was a massive influence on me. He very much impressed upon me about autobiographical writing and writing what you know, and using your own experience, because that's what's unique, is your life, hence The Estate Agent's Daughter. I couldn't write academic poetry. I couldn't write that kind of cryptic crossword poetry. It's just not in my bones. So my stuff is quite... I find it incorporates a lot of everyday language, a lot of the everyday vernacular of the Welsh dialect as well, which in my view is intrinsically poetic and intrinsically musical. So Hugo was hugely influential in that regard. So yeah, I'd say Dorothy Parker, Hugo Williams and Dylan Thomas. What am I currently reading? Right, okay. Now, poetry-wise, I am reading Zoe Brigley's Hand and Skull. She is a Blood Axe poet who is also from Bridgend, from my stag. This chap, I think, is turning into my favourite poet of all time. His name is Tony Hoagland. and he's so witty and acerbic without being too arch and self-knowing, which I kind of feel is becoming quite a common signature dropped it in a lot of poetry these days. So that's my poetry reading list. Reading a lot of feminist work actually. So fiction wise, I'm reading Bernardine Everistow's Girl, Woman, Other, which is incredible. I'm just halfway through that at the moment. And non-fiction wise, I'm reading Helen Lewis's Difficult Women, History of Feminism in 11 Fights, which is incredible. What advice do you have for current creative writing students? Right, publish your first work if you can, your first book before having children. Like I say, time is a luxury. I became a single mum when my daughter was 1 year of age, and if you have childcare, that is a game changer, but if you don't and you have to hold down a regular job, it is blinking hard. So get your first book out before you start breeding. Also, stave off breeding for a year after the book in case the book is really successful and you get lots of opportunities, because that is your window. That's when you're hot, you know. So that's my other piece of advice. If you can, always have something, especially it's so much easier now with being able to submit work online and by email, whereas before I used to send like a self-addressed postcard with a second-class stamp which had the title of the poetry magazine and the titles of the poem I sent, so I could make sure I could cross-reference it with my Excel spreadsheet. Yes. What else? Surround yourself by writers and like-minded writers. Do you know what? The writing community can be a very lovely community. Network. Be with people who inspire you. What I found very useful at the start of my career was having a mentor and friend who I would show work to almost daily. And that really spurred me along. And I used to go to quite a lot of poetry workshops in London, and I found that hugely influential. There was one which was probably the most well-reputed one, which contained a lot of well-regarded poets, but I found it very brutal. And if you managed to survive that poetry workshop, it was probably a competition winner. But if it didn't, you probably would never look at that poem again and detested it. So I think it's always important to highlight what is good in the work rather than just redlining what is bad or is wrong, because we do have very brittle egos as writers. You know. Yeah. What else about the process? So what I did when I was initially sort of cutting my teeth, of course it's all different in COVID, I went to the Poetry Kit. Write Out Loud is a very good website as well, and I had a little pocket diary, and I listed all the poetry readings that were happening for every day of the week in this 1 year pocket diary. And I was just hungry for it. So I went to as many open mics as I could. I made CDs of my work. I actually went to a recordist to get CDs made, which I submitted to certain gigs. And I mean, there was one Sunday, I think I went to 4 gigs in one day, 4 open mics. You know, I was just sort of poetically promiscuous in that way, you know. So it's important just to get out there and be seen and be heard, and to use open mics are brilliant for road testing material. That's the way I've always seen it. It's a good way of taking a draft poem where you've taken it as far as you can take it, and sometimes it will expose what's wrong with it as well, especially if you stumble.